We're en route to Gallup, New Mexico, and we're going to get there about 30 minutes after sunset. The airport sits among some mountains that we may not be able to see well, so we need a bulletproof strategy. You might consider the opposite of the spiral climb departure strategy and spiral down to the airport. But that has some of the same downsides as the spiral climb at night, and there's a better option that borrows from IFR procedure. Let's pause the flight here and back up to the planning stage to see what sort of plan we came up with. When flying IFR, you always have a published altitude that assures a certain amount of terrain and obstacle clearance. That's what we need to figure out here. What are the safe altitudes as we go along? Some of those we can borrow from IFR charts and IFR procedure. The sectional chart has maximum elevation figures, which represent the highest terrain or obstacle in a half-degree quadrant, rounded up usually by a few hundred feet. We could take that 8,600 feet and add, say, 500 or 1,000 feet to it for a safe altitude. But in this area, the 8,600 foot sector is just too broad to really be useful. And the highest terrain here that's causing the high MEF really isn't close to where we're going. But we are on an airway here, and the minimum en route altitude on the airway is 9,400 within 25 miles of the Gallup VOR. In mountainous areas like this, the MEA comes with 2,000 feet of obstacle clearance within 4 miles of the route centerline. And looking at the sectional, it makes sense that 9,400 would give about 2,000 feet of clearance. That sanity check with the sectional chart is critical. You should always put these IFR altitudes in context and understand why they are what they are. Make them make sense in the bigger picture. So as I'm descending for the pattern VFR, I don't necessarily need a full 2,000 feet of clearance. So let's say within 25 miles of the Gallup VOR on the airway, 8,400 is a comfortable minimum altitude that still gives me a 1,000 foot buffer. So that's a good start since it's only about 2,000 feet above airport elevation, but when is it going to be safe to descend the rest of the way to pattern altitude? It's tough to say just looking at the contour lines on the sectional. And this is where you can borrow another bit from IFR procedure and use the circling minimums on instrument approaches. Generally, the circling minimums are going to be about the same for every approach at a given airport, so it doesn't especially matter which one we look at. Let's start by looking at the RNAV 6. To get that, we'll tap on the airport, go to Procedures, Approach, and RNAV Runway 6. And for our purposes here, we can ignore everything on the chart except for the circling minimums on the bottom and the notes on the top. There's nothing in the notes related to circling on this one, so let's ignore that for now too. Most instrument approaches provide for a more or less straight-in landing on a specific runway, but they also usually offer a circling option. The circling option includes a minimum altitude which protects you from terrain and obstacles as long as you maintain within a certain protected radius. The size of the radius depends on the maximum speed you might fly, where faster speeds require more maneuvering space. Higher categories belong to faster aircraft. It doesn't especially matter for our purposes what the speed cutoffs are. We just want to know where the safe airspace is. Category D, for example, offers a safe altitude of 7,720 feet MSL, or about 1248 above airport elevation, within a certain protected radius. For Category C, the safe altitude is lower, 7,460 MSL, or about 1,000 AGL, and the protected area is smaller. But when can we use these altitudes? And here's a chart showing the standard circling radius for each category. For Category D, the minimum altitude is safe within 2.3 nautical miles measured from a runway end. Then Category C offers 1.7 nautical miles of protection at 7,460 MSL. That's basically pattern altitude, so although categories A and B allow us to get a bit lower, in this case I don't really care. I want an altitude that gets me down to pattern altitude and I can take it from there. But be careful though, because circling minimums don't provide nearly the buffer that en route altitudes do. So make sure that your altimeter is set up correctly and use all the other tools you have to supplement this, including your eyes out the window. So we have a plan. I've determined safe altitudes I can use all the way in. On the airway, I can go as low as 8,400 and still have at least 1,000 feet of clearance. Then when I'm within 2.3 nautical miles of any runway end, I'm protected by the Category D circling minimums at 7,720 MSL. And then once I get within 1.7 nautical miles, the Category C circling minimums cover me at pattern altitude. Then I have a PAPI to follow on final, which offers protection out to 3.4 miles within 10 degrees of the center line unless the chart supplement says otherwise, which it doesn't here. In practice, I can probably descend a bit earlier than this with reference to the GPS's terrain layer and what I see out the window, but I have a conservative plan here that offers me safe altitudes all the way to the ground. We have about 20 minutes to go here to Gallup, and what I'm going to do is start descending when the vertical speed required on the GPS says about 700 feet per minute. I've got it set up in the flight plan here within a long track waypoint a mile before Gallup at pattern altitude. So that's where the vertical speed required is giving us guidance to. I need to, of course, keep in mind that that's just drawing a straight line from here to there. It doesn't matter if it intersects terrain. It's not going to protect me from hitting terrain. But I've done the homework in order to find altitudes that do protect me from terrain. And I want to show you how I've written them on my chart here to help me remember where and what they are. What I've done is use the annotation tool. 8,400 is my safe altitude on the airway that I know gives me at least 1,000 feet of buffer over terrain. And then the circling minimums take over when I get within a certain radius of the end of the runway. So I just measured with the ruler out to 2.3 miles, for example, for the category D radius. And once I'm within that, 7,700 is a safe altitude. Once I get within 1.7, I've put the blue line there, and 7,500, that's pattern altitude. So I can descend to pattern altitude once I'm past that blue line. I can descend to 7,700 past the red line, practically the same thing. It's not especially precise here, my drawings on ForeFlight, but that's not really the point. It's more of just a reminder of where I can go to what altitude, so I don't have to keep that all in mind. And if my goal is to stay at least 1,000 feet above terrain, at least until I get within those circling minimums, I can help myself out by displaying terrain on the GPS, because anything within 1,000 feet of me is going to display yellow. So I can supplement the altitudes I chose with the GPS.
Vertical track.
I just got the vertical track enunciation and the top of descent in 1 minute. I'm going to start coming down now. Before I do that, I'm going to bug the altitude I'm descending to, which is my minimum altitude for this section, 8,400. And let's start coming down. And I'm going to match my vertical speed to my vertical speed required, while keeping in mind here that that's not the thing that's keeping me safe from hitting anything. What's keeping me safe is the 8,400 foot minimum altitude that we chose. Crossing the Gallup VOR in just a couple miles here. Still have no nearby yellow terrain in close vicinity to me, which makes sense. We're still 600 feet above the minimum altitude I set. This course sets me up pretty well to enter a left downwind for runway 24. I feel comfortable descending all the way down here now to that outer circling minimum. We're just crossing 8,400 now. There's nothing yellow on the GPS, and I'm pretty close to the airport. That 2.4 miles is not a countdown to the airport here. I'm still on the -1 waypoint. And we should be able to take this all the way down to pattern altitude now. But you can see some of the yellow starting to creep in behind me and to the side. Now as I set up on the downwind here, you can see much more terrain that's within 1,000 feet of me. Alright, gear is coming down. 1, 2, 3 lights.
Alert. Terrain ahead.
That's ForeFlight with the terrain alert, which is not especially comforting or unexpected really, but I know that I'm at a reasonable altitude for a normal pattern, and I'm not going to be distracted by an alert for terrain that I'm already turning away from. And actually, I don't see a PAPI like they're supposed to be here. And part of the plan for safe altitudes involved using the PAPI, but this is a good example of how these methods are there to supplement what you usually do VFR. The fact that there's supposed to be a working 3-degree PAPI means that a 3-degree path is clear, and I know that my normal pattern geometry gives a slightly steeper angle than that. The sight picture looks right, and this runway has pretty normal dimensions that I'm used to judging, so I have no problem with continuing here. There we go, safely on the ground in Gallup, New Mexico. Before we go here, let's take a look at a few variations and complications here that are important not to overlook. Let's check out the nearby Window Rock Airport, and note that in the circling minimums line, there's this inverse C symbol. That indicates that here, there's an expanded circling area with wider protection than the one we looked at Gallup. What happened was that in 2012, it was recognized that the protected areas weren't always sufficient for aircraft maneuvering at higher true airspeeds involved at high elevation airports. So circling procedures began to be designed using a greater circling radius that depends on altitude, and procedures that use that expanded area are marked with that C symbol. Here's the table that shows the new protected areas, and note that it's wider across the board. On this procedure that we're looking at here, Category D minimums are not authorized. They're just not offered. But Category C has a protected area that extends all the way out to 3.2 miles, which is nice. Eventually, all the procedures are going to use this new criteria, and they've already started removing the C symbol from charts. And so it's even possible that Gallup, where we just landed, is surveyed using the wider circling areas. There's just really no convenient way for a pilot to know. So if the expanded circling areas seem like good news, the bad news is in the notes part of the chart. Here it says that circling to runway 21 is not authorized at night. That means there's some unlit obstacle on the way in below the minimum altitude, and it's a good clue that landing on this runway at night, even VFR, might be a bad call. There's something out there that you won't be able to see at night. Here's another one to look out for. At Cottonwood, Arizona, circling is not authorized southwest of runway 1432. That means this entire area is not protected at circling minimum altitudes. So there's nuance and gotchas to understand and watch out for, but if you do understand how these work, they can offer safe minimum altitudes in the vicinity of airports.